What's up, people? Welcome back to the crew, Kingdom of Opinions. I am your host, Puneet. I'm back and I'm very irritated because of this lockdown, this quarantine, the forceful house arrest that I am going through. It is very annoying. Those of you who have experienced it would know what I'm talking about. So, being confined to your house, otherwise, you would need to drag me out of the house just to get me to a local market also. But now that I know that I cannot go out, the house is annoying. Nevertheless, I have decided finally today I am going to sit and do all my reactions. I have a entire list of plethora of videos that I wanted to react to, and I've decided today I'm going to finish all of them, complete my backlog so that I can upload my reactions more religiously. So here goes nothing. Let's begin. The first one that I am planning to react to is wait, let me get to it. Is the five unsettling events that were turned into movies years later. So let's not waste any more time. Let's see this. This is fresh. Even I have not seen this. So let's go.
Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a truly unsettling horror film, thinking to yourself, I'm so glad this isn't real, only to find out later that the film is based on true events? There's no denying that an authentic and creepy backstory behind an
I would have seen quite a lot of these movies. So let us see how many movies I have seen out of this.
already spooky film can up the fear factor. These 5 films are worth a watch if you want something deriving from real-life encounters and experiences. Number 5. The 2009 horror film titled Birdella is somewhat self-explanatory, but only if you're familiar with the Missouri state criminal, Robert Birdella, also known as the Kansas City Butcher. Robert took the lives of at least 6 confirmed male victims over the course of his crimes.
I know the serial killer documentary, but the movie I did not know existed. Now I have to watch it.
Spree, which ran from 1984 to 1987. His nickname was derived from the fact that he would keep his victims locked up as prisoners for as long as 6 weeks. While he held them in captive, he harmed and disfigured them on the daily. As far as his disposal routine, the details are too graphic, but let's just say that it played a part in his nickname. Robert was seen as a sick and twisted individual, even by healthcare professionals. Robert's reign finally ended when he was apprehended and convicted of over 6 counts of taking lives and several smaller charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with no
So these six counts were the only legal cases that were filed. So the six cases are not the only cases.
chance of parole. In 1992, at 43 years old, Robert passed away in prison due to a heart condition. Birdella was written and directed by William Taft with the help of his co-director Paul South. It's described as a horror thriller, but some may see it as a biopic, considering that it's Robert's real life and closely follows the true details of what really happened. The film
Why would you make such a horrific movie is my question.
strays away from creating a plot to work around, and instead it uses the real-life cases and details to reenact Robert's dark crimes, his party lifestyle, and his never-ending insanity. Dark, dirty, and highly graphic scenes may be too much for some viewers to witness,
Yeah.
but director William Taft worked with the talented actor Seth Coria, who portrayed Robert, to recreate the crimes and behavior as closely to reality as possible.
That's a signal for something else. Very annoying, I know. Yeah, let him pass.
This is just one of the many reasons the film is so gut-wrenching to watch. It's the kind of film that will leave you baffled at the fact that such heinous things could happen in the real world. Number 4. The Town That Dreaded Sundown was a 1976 slasher horror film directed and produced by Charles Pierce and written by Earl Smith. The film was one of the first of its genre and paved the way for many creative productions that we have today. Even today, the film is honored as a cult classic
Quite scary.
that shows off more than just a scary plot, with impressive performances from the entire cast, and effects art well ahead of its time. The movie follows a Texas Ranger, portrayed by Ben Johnson, that's led on a wild manhunt when people in Texarkana, Arkansas, are mysteriously preyed upon by an unidentified antagonist, referred to as the Phantom. Watching the film by today's standards may cause some scenes or effects to seem cliche, but it's important to keep in mind that at the time of release, no other productions had used the
If you see this movie and you consider it as a 1970s movie, really worth a watch. If you're not afraid of scary sounds and dark black and white backgrounds, and most of the movies in the night time.
aforementioned details in such a way. That being said, the film features all the basics necessary for a classic slasher, such as fight and chase scenes, jump scares, suspense, and more. Those that watched the movie at its premiere were shocked and completely horrified. It didn't help that movie posters featured a line saying, "In 1946, this man took the lives of 5 people. Today, he still lurks the streets of Texarkana." This brought the public's attention to the fact that the film was based on true events that unfolded nearly 30 years prior. The cases were referred to as the Texarkana Moonlight Crimes. During spring of that year, a mysterious criminal began carrying out his sick acts by attacking innocent people, usually couples, on the side of the road or in the woods. The suspect was eventually deemed the Phantom, as news media covered the stories and greatly contributed to the panic. The anonymous villain attacked at least 10 people over the course of 3 to 4 months, 5 of whom eventually passed away. Unfortunately for police, the Phantom never left behind a shred of evidence, and investigators found themselves constantly coming to abrupt stops in their cases. For years, there were no suspects or persons of interest. Similarly, it seemed as though even those that were attacked and had luckily survived explained that they weren't able to see the attacker's face, and thanks to the initial shock of the encounter, didn't get a good look at his body type either. Obviously, it was confirmed that the crimes were carried out by a man, and most likely one working alone. Thanks to a lack of technology in nearly every department, investigators eventually had to set the case aside to make room for more urgent matters. It went cold, and despite the original uproar, the community eventually either forgot about the attacks or simply didn't care because they happened so long ago. However, this compelling film gave them a deeper look into the cases and sparked fear that the attacker could return or continue his work any day. Luckily, the film's release didn't seem to strike any chords with the attacker, and he never resurfaced.
So in those times, actually, a lot of serial killers got away with it for a longer period of time because of the lack of forensic science or Sherlock Holmes novels.
Number 3. Wes Craven is easily one of the most successful horror directors in the film industry thanks to his work in media such as the Scream franchise. The 1988
Why have I not seen this movie?
film, The Serpent and the Rainbow, is one of Wes Craven's lesser-known productions, despite its blockbuster premiere that accrued nearly 3 times the film's $7 million budget. A brief online summary of the film states, in 1985, after successful research in the Amazons, Dr. Dennis Allen from Harvard is invited by the president of a Boston pharmaceutics industry, Andrew Cassidy, to travel to Haiti to investigate the case of a man named Christophe that died in 1978 and is apparently returned to life. Andrew wants samples of the voodoo drug that was used in Christophe to be tested with the intention of producing a powerful anesthetic. Dr. Allen travels to meet Dr. Marielle Duquet, that is treating Christophe, and arrives in Haiti in a period of revolution. Soon, Allen is threatened by an individual who's a torturer and powerful witch. Allen learns that death is not the end, and the beginning of his journey to hell. Playing with concepts such as substance abuse, ghosts, demons, dark magic, and much more, the film effectively tells the compelling story, with visual effects and cast performances that keep the viewer locked into the story, regardless of their growing fear. Seeing as the film features so-called zombies, you might not be able to believe that it was based on true events, but you'd be wrong. Wade Davis published a nonfiction book of the same name in 1985.
Okay.
In the writing, he documents and describes his
Okay.
experience in Haiti, where he was sent to
Alright.
study a peculiar
Thank
case
you.
in which a Haitian voodoo was
What
allegedly
about
used
to
to revive a
relax?
man that was no longer alive. The man had apparently lived as a zombie for over 2 years. David claims to have found evidence supporting this
Is it gone?
story, although things were still more on the
My
scientific
God.
side as opposed to the supernatural. The novel wasn't immediately accepted by readers, especially those in the professional field.
What
However,
the
even if the
hell?
events weren't true, the novel still takes a deep dive into the mysterious and magical world
This is so disgusting. Is that I think that's a snake of some types.
of Haitian voodoo and supernatural beliefs.
Anything, huh?
Number 2. This 1983 Austrian horror film, Angst, was directed by Gerald Karg. Although he's credited with countless roles in a variety of successful productions, he's best known for this chilling film. The plot follows a demented, evil serial criminal who's been recently released from prison under unknown circumstances. The psychopath returns to a life of heinous crimes almost as soon
He's deranged, he's psychopath, he is psychopathic, he is a murderer, he is a lunatic. All the words that can be negative are used, and then he's released from the prison.
as he steps back into the free world. Although he encounters numerous possible victims during his travels, he's unable to act on his dark desires for fear of leaving a mess or witness behind and inevitably being arrested again. Finally, after his frustration makes him impatient, he finds a home tucked away in a suburban area. Inside, he finds a disabled man in a wheelchair, but as he's making his plans, the man's mother and sister arrive home. The psychopath sees a golden opportunity, and the rest of the film follows the perfect horror mixture of hunting, taunting, and attacking. Gerald later explained that the film is based on the actions of an Austrian serial killer, who was a notorious figure in Austria that was apprehended for several robberies and taking the life of a 73-year-old woman. The subsequent trial declared that Warner was insane, so he was only sentenced to 8.5
I have seen The Shining. This would be nothing compared to that. This will be a walk in the park after The Shining.
years in a mental prison. He seemed to exhibit an improved character with strict morals when he went before the parole board in January of 1980. He was set to be released in just a few short weeks when he was allowed a 3-day furlough instead to help him secure a stable job before returning to the real world. As expected for someone with a lengthy criminal record, he struggled and eventually failed to find stable work. So instead, he decided to embark on a crime binge when he broke into the home and took the lives of 3 people: a mother, a daughter, and a disabled son. He went on the run for a couple days, but later came forward to confess his crimes, leading to an arrest and additional convictions. Number 1. In the 2005 Australian horror Wolf Creek, a group of backpackers hike into the Australian outback wilderness and become hopelessly lost
Fine. Something that I can. This is something I've seen. Okay.
and stranded just as their journey begins. The trio come across the famous Wolf Creek crater and are approached by a mysterious person who describes himself as a bushman. It seems that the hikers are saved when he offers them a ride to his home, where they can rest and regroup from their hike back. Unfortunately, the bushman isn't quite the hero you'd expect, and his team of friends come face to face with what can only be described as a living nightmare. Greg McLean, the man responsible for co-producing, writing, and directing the film, mentioned that the plot of this movie was based
You have to see the first murder this guy commits
on crimes of a notorious Australian
in
serial
the movie.
criminal named Ivan Milat, who was eventually convicted for taking the lives of at least 7 people between 1989 and 1993. Ivan spent time watching and waiting in the outback for adventurous hikers. After he would lure them and build their trust, he would turn on them and take their lives. The victims were aged between 19 and 22 and were later found partially buried in the woods. Ivan didn't devote too much time or attention to his cleanup method and couldn't escape the law for very long. He was finally apprehended, and before being convicted, he worked with the police to uncover the remains of other hikers that had not yet been discovered. His means of operation were quite gross, to put it lightly, and apparently those unimaginable evil acts were a source of odd inspiration for Greg McLean,
First murder he commits in the movie.
who actually studied the case to better understand the routine and overall thought process of Ivan. Wolf Creek did well in the box office and attracted many fans for its attention to detail and overall production value.
So, these were the five unsettling events that were turned into movies years later. Quite an easy reaction to start with, nothing much. So, let's see what comes next. For this one, sayonara.